Hello and welcome back to my channel. Make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. Let's begin. It was the last working day for the Seriidii students before summer halls began. Rukia walked through the corridors with a blank expression on her face. Things had been better for her now, but not everything felt right. She didn't know why, but everything seemed so monotonous. She woke up, ate, studied, ate, pretended to enjoy with her friends and slept. And then the same next day. And the next. And the next. The classes were all over as the students hurried around talking. They had been given a fat load of homework, but Rukia was fine with it, because she was going to meet her father again. Finally. At first, when she had newly arrived at Seritai, she'd visited Kuro every weekend. As the work pressure kicked in, she began to visit once a month, which slowly changed to talks on the phone, which then slowly changed to none at all. It had been exactly 4 months since she'd last seen the guy. Rukia. Promise me you'll call me. Momo cried, leaping towards Rukia and hugging her. A familiar warmth spread through the violet-eyed girl, who smiled and nodded. I will. I'll miss you so much. Send my love to your dad, okay? Yeah. Momo waved and hurried away to pack up her things. Her parents were coming to pick her up the following morning. Rukia watched her go and for the first time felt a sinking sensation at the pit of her stomach to watch a classmate, a friend, leave. Hey, Earth to Kuchiki, came a voice and she looked up to see Rinji's foaming red hair. Whatcha thinking? She shrugged, aren't you going to pack? He snorted, pack. Are you kidding me? I'm staying back for the halls. Why? I don't have a great going with my dad. He has a thing about me attending Seritai. Ranjiku had joined them, a lopsided smile on her face. Yeah, I'm sure a father would hate their kid to attend one of the best universities in Japan. Rinji inhaled deeply, looking like he could care less. He wanted me to be in the family business. Instead, I chose anything else apart from that. Ranjiku rolled her eyes and folded her hands, making her brsts lean forward even more. Fine, make yourself useful then and help me pack. Why? Because you're not gonna get any until you do. I'm not gonna get any no matter what I do for you. You'll definitely not be getting any if you don't do this. Otherwise that you might stand a chance, she winked. Well, I'll be leaving you. Have a good holiday, Rukia said, turning around and making her way to the janitor's closet. Some would think she was crazy for going there, of all places to find peace, but it gave her an odd sense of comfort. It was a small place where she fit perfectly and still left enough space to move about. Walking quietly, she opened the door and closed it behind her as she entered. She pressed her head against the wall and closed her eyes, sighing. It's been a year since I last saw them. It wasn't until she'd opened her eyes that she saw a tall figure staring down at her, hunched up in a corner. Rukia was about to scream, but the way he looked at her with horror told her he was more scared of her than she was. Plus, she'd seen this guy. He was the one girls followed and swooned over, and the one who'd knocked out Jin Ikamaru in that fight. What do you want? He asked, backed against the wall, a mop lying next to him. He had orange hair. Rukia didn't remember his name but she had a vague idea it meant a fruit. What do you want, woman? Ichigo Kurosaki, she said out loud, his name finally coming to her. Yeah. Rukia held the leash of her bag, staring at him. What are you doing in the janitor's closet? What are you doing in the janitor's closet? He shot back. I asked first. Hiding, he looked at her confused expression, from a bunch of girls. They're looking for me to give me their DMN number. Oh. So what are you doing here? I come here time to time. Just like that, she shrugged, not wanting to explain further to this strange-looking boy. She sent him a second glance, be it her imagination, but he looked like an exact replica of Kain, her imaginary friend, only with orange hair. But it was impossible for someone to look like a person she'd imagined. Right? She was bewildered and looked on at him in curiosity. Could you do me a favor? He asked. What? Would you stop staring at me? A blush tainted her cheeks and she looked down. I wasn't staring. He rolled his eyes. You so were. I wasn't. So were. Thwack. Ow, he mumbled as she hit him. She huffed and leaned back. They stayed silent for a few seconds before Ichigo looked up at her and rubbed his hair uncomfortably. Well, could do me another favor? She raised a brow. What? I really need to pack my stuff, so if you could just come with me and look out for those girls and yeah, his voice trailed off. She blinked at him, not really knowing what to say, before shrugging. Sure. March 22, 2010, 7:00 p.m. Rukia rubbed her eyes in exhaustion. The sun was setting as she made her way back home. It had been a disastrous day at school. If the fact that her grades were still slipping wasn't enough, and she was being constantly bullied on and told her how flat-chested she was, now she had been told off by the principal. For probably the 10th time. And if that isn't irritating enough, they have to mention my sister. Rukia said to Kayan as she kicked a rock. Kayan was the only friend who understood her, or the only friend she had, to be more precise, probably because he was imaginary. But his Anna's not that bad. Kayan said, shrugging. Are you falling for her now? No, of course not, he cried, then peeked at her, bending a little. Besides, you know I'm secretly in love with you. She rolled her eyes and pushed the door of her house. Just like that, Kayan vanished into thin air. I'm home, she cried. No answer, as usual. Rukia climbed the stairs up to her room that she shared with his Anna. His Anna was there, reading a book, looking light and beautiful, similar to what Rukia would look like if not for the several scratches and purple bruises that flawed her arms and face. She made no attempt to talk as she threw her bag and loosened her tie. It was almost 7, and his Anna and Ami Kuchiki needed no explanation as to why Rukia had been late. They all knew she'd been in detention. As usual. Half of the room that the sisters shared was purple and filled with posters of teenage heartthrobs, famous actors and actresses, and fashion magazines. There were books, teddy bears and mirrors, and clothes hanging smartly off the hangers. There was no mistaking that this half of the room belonged to the pampered, much-loved his Anna Kuchiki. On the other half was Rukia's bed, with beautiful paintings that Ami called worthless adorning the walls. Color pencils, oil pastels and sketches were littered all over her bed, all bought by Rukia with her own pocket money. The paintings were probably the only thing that attracted a person to Rukia's half of the room and not her sister's. How was your day? His Anna asked. Rukia fell on her bed. Not better than yours, don't worry, she retorted back, closing her eyes. She made to make herself comfortable when a harsh cry awoke her from downstairs. Rukia, get the hell down here. Sighing, she got up and walked down the stairs to where Ami Kuchiki stood, arms folded and foot tapping. Why haven't you changed out of your uniform? I just came back from school. Another detention then. You don't learn, do you? Rukia snorted. Smack. Wrong thing to do. Ami was obviously not in a good mood. When I ask you a question, I want you to answer it. Don't you snort in front of me. Rukia glared. Yes, I had detention, and no, apparently I don't learn, but it's not my fault. You think I enjoy it? No, but I would have thought that after years of telling you to concentrate, you would have at least tried. Stop making excuses for yourself. Now take that uniform off and run it by the washing machine if you want it to dry off by tomorrow. You never tell his Anna that. There are many things I don't have to tell his Anna. Ami came closer to Rukia, her icy blue eyes sending chills down her body. Believe me, girl, if you were even half of what she is, I wouldn't be so sad. Something about the way Ami had said girl hurt. It was like as if she didn't even want to acknowledge the fact that Rukia was her daughter. Well, for all she knew, Ami didn't. It was 9 by the time Rukia got free to start with her homework. Ami had told her to come and help with the house chores, telling not to disturb his Anna. Her left cheek hurt from where Ami had hit her. Rukia's eyes stared fuzzily at the notebook filled with numbers and symbols she never understood, no matter how she tried to try. She stood up, taking her oil paints out and one of her paintings that she hadn't finished. You know you're supposed to finish your homework, don't you? Kayan asked, appearing out of nowhere. Rukia grunted as he came behind her and put his arms around her. I don't care. She was there when the doctor told I was dyslexic, but she's somehow got it into her mind that I'm just making up excuses because I'm pathetic. She will understand one day. Rukia laughed, trying to ignore the nostalgia of it all. The time in the doctor's office when her parents had told her everything would be all right, that they would get her through it somehow, that they'd manage it together. Who was she kidding? She won't, she said, looking into the vivid blue of the ocean in her painting. Paints. It was the only thing that calmed Rukia down when she felt like ripping someone out. The sheet of paper was a way to express herself, an entirely new world, her world. Her way of showing a places inside that other might never see otherwise. Rukia had never learnt painting in any classes, she'd just gotten it on her own. She just let everything in her loose and her fingers knew what to do. She worked with a critical eye. Her world would go away and she would get lost when she painted. It was the only thing she was good at. The only talent she had. Bravo, smiled Kayan as she did the last strokes and the finishing touches, and stepped back to view the piece of art. It's perfect. She let herself smile. Perfect, a word she was dying to hear from someone's lips. It was a pretty simple painting, the full moon at a beach with a dark figure standing on the sands, her dress swaying. Somehow, it reminded her of herself. The water shimmered and Rukia was lost in it, so much so that she didn't hear Ami's rampant yelling, or the stamping on the staircase. It was only when Ami banged the door open that Rukia jumped and turned to look at her mother's furious face. His Anna shot up, awoken by the bang and gasped, looking around. Mom. What's the matter? Rukia Kuchiki, have you been hiding your test results from me? Rukia winced as she was pulled down by the hair. So the secret reason for her detention was out. I found this when it fell out of your bag. Ami held up an exam paper, showing a big, red F marked on top. Tell me. How dare you? How dare you? Mom dash. Out of this, his Anna. You're despicable, Rukia. Ami pushed her away. Rukia fell on her canvas and sunk into the floor, taking her painting with her. And no, she cried, clutching it delicately, but the paint had already been smeared off. It was ruined. And what is that? Ami grabbed the canvas, and her rage only grew. I told you to stop this pathetic drawing. I do not earn for you to while it all away in some messy scrawl and rainbow colors. Rukies tried to reach out for the painting desperately but failed as Ami stamped downstairs, muttering cuss words. She looked back to see his Anna's face holding an expression of pity and remorse. She's in a pretty bad mood tonight, Rukia. Her boss threatened to fire her. His Anna explained, biting her lip, you shouldn't have done this, you know it'll only egg her on. Rukia threw her a glare before running down the stairs. She froze when she saw Ami kneeling towards the fireplace, the painting in the flames, and her mother curled up, rocking herself as tears ran down her face. What dash? Her voice died from her throat. Rukia didn't know what to do as Ami looked up at her. What am I supposed to do with you? I try so hard, Rukia. And then I see come back and everything, I hope for both of you goes down and I'm so sorry, she cried to her daughter. I don't know what to do with you. Rukia's violet eyes watched as the waters of the ocean in the painting were engulfed by the flames. Her vision was blurring. Come. Please come, I'm so sorry. Ami raised her arms but Rukia started backing away. Leave me alone. Please, I love you. Leave me alone. Rukia ran up the stairs and inside her room. His Anna stared at her tear-smudged face, wide-eyed. What happened? Rukia said nothing, just fell on her bed and curled up inside her covers, trying to forget it all. What had happened to that old, happy-go-lucky family? The family that went on picnics, laughed, the mother who held her and told her it was okay, the father who pulled on faces and got scolded. It felt like it had happened only hours ago. That memory of the good, old days. So real, so terrifyingly real that if Rukia turned, she thought she might see her set of parents sitting on the picnic sheet, spreading out the food and kissing while his Anna went "You-wow." But all Rukia saw was the plain, brick wall staring back at her. They crept down the hall quietly, Rukia tiptoeing and keeping her eyes wide pen as Ichigo ducked behind lockers and coke machines, waiting for the green signal. "Will you please tell me where you need to go in the first place?" she hissed at him. "The boys' dorms obviously," he said, annoyed. "I know the boys' dorms, but for your information, they consist of 5 buildings." He rolled his eyes at her. "I know that, just leave me at the entry gate. After that I can manage myself, midget." She stopped, making him bump into her. "What? I don't ow. Foo dash." Rukia had grabbed his collar and slammed him onto a nearby coke machine with her leaning onto him threateningly. "Don't you dare call me a midget, you strawberry." Ichigo's brow furrowed angrily. "What do you dash?" Suddenly his eyes widened as his eyes fell on something on Rukia's arm. Rukia looked down to see that her full sleeve had rolled down when she'd held his collar, and that her left forearm was almost exposed. Immediately she let go of him and smoothed it down. "What was that?" Ichigo asked, unnerved. "Nothing. No, I swear I saw some dash." "It was nothing," she huffed, turning away from him so that he couldn't see her expression. "Now if you want my help then stop calling me a midget and stop looking at things you're not supposed to." Ichigo watched her go, eyes narrowed. March 23, 2010, 7 a.m. Rukia walked down to the silent breakfast table the next morning. His Anna was eating toast, and Ami in the kitchen, cooking. The warm smell of omelette filled the spring air. Without a word, Rukia opened the door to get out. "Eat something before you go," his Anna said from behind quietly. "I'm fine," Rukia muttered and slammed it behind her. His Anna turned to look at Ami. "You don't have to be so harsh on her." "I don't know what to be anymore." Ami shot back. Doodling on the back page of her book seemed to be the best way to pass the time. "Miss Kuchiki." She jumped. "What's the solution to this equation?" The sir gestured to the blackboard. Rukia stared blankly at the numbers that swam in front of her eyes. Several students giggled, some looked on sympathetically. "I'm waiting," the sir said. Rukia remained silent. "What is it, Rukia Kuchiki?" "Some too hard," the sir began walking over to her desk. "Okay, then, at least you can tell me what I said to the class 2 minutes ago." Minutes passed, but she said nothing. He came closer to her and looked at the bunny she had doodles on her book. He held it up for the whole class to see. "Look, children, a great artist is born." They laughed. Rukia bowed her head down, trying to control her temper, and said nothing yet still. "If you put the slightest effort you put on your studies then maybe you won't have to make excuses about dyslexia," the sir said coldly. "You're letting it get the better of you. If you ever had the will to do something about it, you would have done it ages ago. Where is that will? Who would even think that you are his Anna Kuchiki's sister?" He took out a piece of paper and scribbled something down before handing it to her. "I want you to take this to the principal." Sighing, Rukia took it and walked out of the class, but just before she had stepped out into the corridor, someone called out quietly. "Hey, piece of advice," it was Lee, the principal's son. "You want to resemble your sister? Get a melon's job done." Nearby people sniggered. Slowly Rukia turned around, with furious eyes. "What did you just say?" "Oh, I think you heard." Rukia neared him, seeing red all of a sudden. The sir noticed. "Rukia Kuchiki, I told you to leave dash." She turned to look at the teacher. "Go to hell," and her fist came down on Lee's cheek, knocking him out straight out in one blow. I'm so sorry, Ami pleaded to the principal in a completely transformed voice from her usual bark. She sent a poisonous look at Rukia, who stood beside her, head hung. I must say I am disappointed. I had been giving this girl chance after chance, hoping to see a flicker of his Rukia Kuchiki in her, hoping she might just change, overseeing all of her excuses, trying to cure her of her dyslexia, but this is abominable. And no, I promise dash. I'm sorry, but with how she's turned out, the principal sent a loathing look at the girl. There is no way I will keep her in my school. For your sake, Mrs. Kuchiki, I'd rather you take her out before I expel her. If I do, then it will be on her record and no school will take her. I'm sure you don't want that. Once after the paperwork was done, Ami took Rukia roughly by the strap of her tunic and dragged her down to the parking lot. Once they reached, she slammed her to the wall. Ami was tall, and Rukia had obviously inherited the height of either of her tall parents. She was pinned, but she didn't bother to argue. She was too used to it. You hit the principal's son. You hit the principal's son. Ami cried with bloodshot eyes, who the hell do you think you are? Her hands gripped Rukia's neck and tightened. Rukia spluttered, and her legs kicked around as she grabbed her mother's wrist, eyes watering. What am I supposed to do with you? Rukia choked and looked into Ami's cold blue eyes, which were frozen and still. For a moment, all that hint of warmth was gone. There was a psychotic flash in there, and for that moment, Rukia knew she was going to die. Ami had become a monster. Ever since the divorce, Ami had become a monster. She had changed forever. She looked at Rukia and she saw the offspring that destroyed her relationship, that caused all the fights, all the problems. Rukia knew, and she closed her eyes, going limp. Just then, Ami let go, and Rukia fell to the ground, gasping. Ami looked horrified, staring at her daughter curled up there, and said nothing for a minute. Then she took her into her arms and began to walk back to the car, throwing her into the car seat roughly. I don't know you. I don't know what you want from me, she muttered, shutting the car door after her and putting it into gear. I don't need you. Go live with that man you call your father. I don't need you. Rukia looked out at the moon bitterly. Did they know how horrible it felt when someone said they didn't need you? She looked around at the paintings she'd done whenever she'd been sad. She wondered if they would look more beautiful if she did one being happy. Would they? She wondered if she'd ever find out. She looked down at her left forearm, which was smeared with blood. Did she feel happy? Ami had announced that she would be calling her father the next day and making arrangements for Rukia to shift and be out of her life. Rukia would be seeing Kuro Machida after so many years she'd forgotten to count. Was her father the same, or had he also changed like Ami had? The letters she'd carved on her arm, perfect, glistened under the silvery moonlight, the blood trickling down the jagged lines. She wondered why it didn't hurt as much as it should. Maybe the pain in her chest numbed the pain in her arm. She wasn't perfect. She was never good enough, never. She knew she was talented. She wanted someone to see it. She wanted someone to tell her she was right, that she was not useless, that she was strong enough for anything. She wanted someone. Just someone. Anyone who would believe in her. Anyone who would tell her she could be perfect. Ichigo followed after Rukia, frowning. You're being very bossy, you know that. I'm aware. And since I'm the only reason you haven't been fed to any girls till now, I suggest you live with it. Rukia snapped, just be happy, I'm not asking for anything in return. I'll give you an autographed photo, he smiled sweetly, but only if you behave. I don't want you to repay me in any way, but if you insist, then you can buy me breakfast, she smiled back. He frowned. Rukia didn't know why, but she felt surprisingly good. All that frustration of the past year, wondering whether her father was all right or not, her mother and her sister, everything had come out in this small squabble, and it felt so good. She eyed Ichigo from the corner of her eyes. He was sulking, muttering something under his breath. Rukia couldn't help but smile at the sight, and giggled. Ichigo looked up, annoyed. What? Nothing. You were laughing at me. She shrugged. Maybe I was. Why? She shrugged again, much to his frustration. He opened his mouth to say something when a trail of girly voices came echoing off the halls, followed by heels clicking. I wonder where he's gone. Ah, sure, you don't have to be so put down. We all know Kurosaki-kun runs away because he's intimidated by your confidence. Ichigo sent Rukia a panicked look. She giggled. Stop laughing and do what I brought you here for. Okay, dash. Rukia looked around and quickly pushed him inside a door just as the two girls came around the corner. One of them was a brunette, quite plump, ugly and pug-faced, while the other was blonde, with a pack of makeup highlighting her face. It made her look attractive and it suited her, but in a strange way, she didn't look any prettier. She was twirling a strand of blonde lock when her eyes fell on Rukia. Hello. Hey, Rukia said, fake smiling. Hey, aren't you that dyslexic chick in first year? Rukia stiffened. I'm not. The brunette nudged the other. Surely, shush. Remember what Professor Yoda told us. Oh, right. Crud, I'm so sorry. Shirley sent Rukia a sympathetic look. Don't worry, sweetie. Dyslexia is so in right now, she nodded wisely. Rukia watched them with growing anger and amusement, wondering whether to yell or to laugh. Some people could be so shallow sometimes. A scuffle sounded from the room that Rukia had pushed Ichigo in. She held the door knob firmly, not letting the door open. I don't know what you're talking about, but you can try it if you want. Being dyslexic, not being able to read, Rukia shrugged at the two. You wouldn't even have to pretend. The girls' faces laced with shock and fury while Rukia watched them smugly, leaning on one foot. You beach, Shirley spat. Oh yeah, I'm sure. Rukia rolled her eyes as the two walked off. A loud yell came from inside the room she had pushed Ichigo in. The door burst open and Ichigo was dragged out by Professor Zaraki, who was pulling Ichigo by his ear. Who do you think you are barging in my office like that, young man? Have you no other business than snooping around? Tell me what you stole. I didn't steal anything, damn it. I told you dash. Then what were you planning on stealing? Nothing. I said that I dash. I will not have disobeying brats like you spying on me. Get out of my sight before I do some serious damage on you. Zaraki pushed Ichigo off of him and slammed his office door shut. Ichigo fell on the floor. Rukia watched in amusement as he began to get up. Professor Zaraki. Seriously? You could have thrown me anywhere and you throw me in that madman's office? Rukia burst out laughing at looking at his face. His scowl deepened but did less to subside her laughter as she went on and on, clutching her stomach. How amazing it felt to laugh like this, to feel like you could melt in one moment and to revel in that for that 1 second, to have a happy memory to think about in the days to come. She laughed and laughed and laughed, and Ichigo's expression softened somewhat. He'd noticed this girl in the corridors. She stayed alone most of the times. Even with friends she was distant, she rarely laughed, and she rarely meant it. Somehow her laughter was music to the ears. But then he realized she was laughing at his sorry butt. Shut up, he mumbled, getting up and brushing his clothes. Rukia shook her head and wiped away tears of laughter, straightening up and taking a deep breath. I can't believe dash. Kurosaki-kun, someone squealed nearby. Rukia and Ichigo exchanged a horrified look before she grabbed him and threw him in Zaraki's office once again. April 7, 2010, 5 p.m. The next 2 weeks passed quickly as Rukia spent most of her time packing to leave for her father's place, which was somewhere in Kakura town, a small town in some DMN place she had never heard of. She had tucked away all her paintings in a big duffel bag, and only a few clothes, save a few belongings, and spent her last days there doodling, stuck inside her room and ignoring her sister and mother. Rukia sat on a chair, overlooking the window one afternoon. Her father, Kuro, would be arriving to pick her up at around 5 in the evening. Ami hadn't given Rukia a glance and Rukia refused to stoop so low as to ask her to. There was a scuffle in the doorway, but Rukia didn't bother to turn. "So, you're finally out of this hellhole." Ami's quiet voice came as she made her way to Rukia. Rukia said nothing, just kept on looking at the sky. "You can cheer up a little now, huh? You think it's a joke?" Rukia asked her. Turning around, "You think that everything will be fine now that I'm leaving? If you do, then let me remind you that this is not what I wanted. I never wanted this. I wanted you to change, to look at me, not to throw me away and give up on me thinking it's for the best. You think it's all going to be alright because I'm far away from all this? It's not even close to alright, it's pathetic and horrible." Ami watched her. Ami, with her raven black hair and beautiful blue eyes with that warmth Rukia had rarely seen. For a minute, Ami looked like the mother she had once been. "You're the one who's going to cheer up," Rukia continued slowly, "you made me go. I know. But I can't trust you with me anymore," Ami said tearfully. Rukia didn't know what to think, whether Ami was acting just for the sake of their last day together or finally feeling remorse. "But you're my daughter. I don't hate you." Rukia let Ami embrace her for one last time and felt a lump in her throat. It wasn't the same when someone said, "I don't hate you" instead of saying, "I love you," but it was better than saying, "I don't love you" anyway. Kaien appeared from behind Ami and smiled a little. "Wanna forget me too, Kuchiki?" Rukia blinked away tears and nodded. Kaien shrugged, "Fair enough. Starting a new life, new friends and all." Just as he vanished into thin air, Ami let go of Rukia and nodded. "Goodbye then." And she walked out the door. April 8, 2010, 8 p.m. Welcome to my humble abode. Rukia walked in as her father held the door open for her. "How is it then?" The house was very small, 1 bathroom, 1 kitchen, and 2 small bedrooms. The living room was stuffed with bed cushions and a portable TV sat in front of the cushion couch. Machida joined her after closing the door and watched her. She blinked. "It's brilliant." "Why, thank you," he smiled and held her at shoulder's length. "My God, I still can't take you in. You've grown so much. I mean, not that tall, obviously." Rukia laughed. "And his Anada, you might even be twins." Rukia's mind flashed back to the sad look in his Anna's eyes when Rukia and Machida had departed from the house. Ami hadn't sent Machida one important glance, nothing except saying, "Take care of her," to which Kuro had curtly replied, "Better than you, I will," and walked out. "Yeah, it's been a long time," Rukia nodded and looked up at her father. He was growing a stubble, but his eyes were the same twinkling brown and skin the pale yellow. Only the glow he had was gone from him, which wasn't that surprising considering that he had lost his whole family. "I'll be in my room. Do you mind if I use the bathroom?" Rukia asked, setting her suitcase down. Kuro laughed, "It's yours too now, Han." Rukia gave him a weak smile and quickly getting a pair of jeans, shirt and her towel, locked herself in the bathroom. For some strange reason, the bathroom was the one place where Rukia had been able to escape everything, where she just sat under the shower for hours and tried to think things out, where she yelled and played different characters from different movies, using the hand shower as the gun. It had always been the place where she could stand, stark naked without a care in the world, and still get to shoot the villains, stand and cry, have her own fairy tale ending, leave reality for a little while. She turned the shower on and leaned against the cool walls of the bathroom, the cold water running down her body. She slid down, hugging her body and tilting her face up to have the water hit her right on her face. She sighed. The cool water washed away the burning stings of all those bruises upon bruises that Ami had given her, all those cuts Rukia had given herself. They shone against the bathroom light, silver scars, straight SND flawed. She was here in Karakura. In around 3 months, if she succeeded to pass her levels, she'd be going to college. Any college or university she wanted, regardless of whether she'd gone to school or not. She wondered if Kuro would go to such extent of trouble for her, to teach her or homeschool her for her exams. She felt her thoughts drifting towards Hisana and Ami. The way she had treated Hisana hadn't seemed fair. Hisana had always treated Rukia like her true sister, had always loved her, but Rukia had been jealous of all the attention Hisana had received from everyone. "Rukia, you okay?" came her father's voice from outside the door. "It's been a quarter of an hour since you've been in there dash." Rukia's eyes shot open. 45 minutes already? "I'm fine," she called out, stepping out of the shower and wiping her body with the towel. "Okay, I have dinner ready." "Yeah, I'll be out in a minute." She winced as the fabric of her towel ran over the cuts on her arm. She quickly pulled her clothes on and got out. That night, they both had dinner like a normal family. They caught up with each other's lives. Machida had a job at a restaurant, but he had taken some time off to spend time with her. She noticed that he kept on looking at her body with curiosity and kept on frowning. She knew he'd noticed the bruises on her arms and legs that Ami had given her and the faint traces of the cuts that stretched almost halfway across her arm, only he refused to say anything. He kept the conversation going and laughing. To see how shaken he was by looking at her injuries, although he didn't mention it, was pleasing, to know that someone had cared. She felt like she was wanted, even if a little bit, or if at all. By fools and hopeless stalkers, but this is unacceptable. Urahara Kisuke was holding his hat, rolling his eyes. Zaraki Kenpachi, their history professor, stood bellowing, along with Rukia and Ichigo, who stood silently, heads hung. "He is after something." Kenpachi pointed dramatically at Ichigo. "He wants to steal some priceless artifact from my office, no doubt." "That's stupid, I dash." "Silence, Kurosaki." "And as we can all see, he now has a partner in crime." Kenpachi glared at Rukia with bloodshot eyes. "I want justice, Kisuke. And justice will be done." "You may leave now, Professor," smiled Urahara warmly. After Kenpachi had stormed out and slammed the door behind him, the dean nodded his head at the two students. "You may go now, you two." Ichigo and Rukia looked up in surprise. What? "You may go. I'll eat my hat if Zaraki hasn't dragged someone or the other to my office claiming they're out to get him every other week. You can leave and pack for tomorrow. Happy holidays." Urahara waved his hat at them, smiling. Rukia nodded and they walked out of the office in silence. The minute they were out of earshot, Ichigo glared at her. "You moron. What were you thinking when you pushed me in there again?" "I was trying to help. There were those girls coming dash. And I couldn't hide anywhere else." "Where else would you have hidden, the trash can dash? Anything was better than that loon's lair dash. Yeah, if you weren't so freakin' tall you could probably, oof." Rukia ran straight into Ichigo as he stopped. She heard a babble of voices and immediately recognized them to be female. A grin was slowly making its way on Rukia's face just as Ichigo grabbed her and pulled her through a door, which turned out to be another janitor's closet. He sighed and cursed, leaning against a shelf of floor detergents. "Back here again. At least it's not on the same floor." "Oh haha, very funny." She eyed him, then giggled. His orange clashed brightly in the dim light of the bulb while he stood, running a hand through his hair. "What are you laughing about?" "It's funny how you're so scared of a bunch of girls." She eyed him cheekily. All of a sudden, she felt alive. It was so silly, to feel happy because she was insulting someone, but suddenly, it felt better, to know that she was not the only one who did stupid things. He frowned. "I am not." "You so are." "I am so not." If you spent a year of your friggin' life being proposed to, or having someone or the other hack into your locker and leave roses and stuff there, you would be hiding too. Aha. Must be so horrifying, to be liked. Rukia replied, looking up to meet his eyes. "I guess I should be happy I'm not in your place then." Something about her eyes cut Ichigo in the middle of his sentence. He blinked a little. He'd noticed Rukia many times in class, but had mostly ignored her because she had always seemed too gothic. Now that he was with her, he wondered how he could have gone through the year without talking to her. This was the first time he was having a civil conversation with a female. Even Inoue Orihime, his only female friend, was awkward around him. "Yeah, I guess," he breathed, clearing his throat. They stayed there in silence for a little while before he talked again. "So, you're staying back or going home for the holidays?" Rukia smiled. She was going home. She had a home to go to. "I'm going home." "You too, right?" "Yep. Wish I didn't have to though." "Why?" Ichigo shrugged, "My dad's a psycho. Must be fun." "Oh, believe me, it's not fun. The only reason I'm going is because of my sisters." Ichigo ran a hand through his hair and rolled his eyes. "Well, one sister in particular, the other pretends she doesn't give a DMN about me." "That's Karen, she's a badass." Ichigo chuckled, shaking his head. Rukia watched him, noticing how he didn't mention his mother but didn't say anything. She wanted to be like how Ichigo was right now, how he was laughing and so fondly talking about his family. "Yeah, I guess it is fun." Ichigo said thoughtfully, "What about you?" "Oh, my dad's going to be there waiting for me." Ichigo hesitated, and Rukia waited. She knew he was going to ask something about the rest of her family, but he looked like he wasn't sure. How could he be? What to ask a person who you've met in the janitor's closet? And a personal question, at that. Just then, the female voices trailed away and there was silence. As quietly as she could, Rukia peeked around the corner and saw the corridor empty. "Okay, the way's clear," she told Ichigo, who squeezed out from beside her, heaving a sigh of relief. Finally. She got out and watched him, and she didn't know why she was smiling. She couldn't believe what had happened in the past hour. It seemed like a stupid observation, but Rukia was convinced that the amount of thrill and joy the last almost 1 hour had brought her was more than the thrill or joy the last 15 years had brought her. And so, without warning, she burst out laughing, doubling over. Ichigo stared at her but she didn't care. "Hey there, are you okay?" She shook her head, just kept on laughing. Ichigo couldn't help but watch her. She did indeed look beautiful when she laughed. He tried to get a sneak peek of her arm, he swore he'd seen something there, but no such luck. Thank you." Rukia choked out to him. He raised a brow, "For what?" "Just thank you." She looked up at him and her eyes were bright and lit up, "For today." "Sure, no problem. But, he looked around awkwardly, "I still need someone to watch while I sneak over to the boys' hostels." Rukia straightened up, "Right. I'll accompany you then," and she marched forward, feeling surprisingly euphoric when she heard his voice from behind her. "Hey, you haven't told me your name yet." She turned around to smile at him. Rukia Kuchiki. April 10, 2010, 6 p.m. I always knew you'd become an artist. These are wonderful. Kuro Machida exclaimed, hugging Rukia as he gazed at the paintings she had done. Rukia had brought all of them with her when she had shifted with him. "You think?" "I think. I know. I'm so proud of you." Rukia smiled. She hadn't felt so normal in ages. It was like Hisana and Ami never existed, except for the one time when Hisana had wanted to talk to Rukia. Deep hatred and envy had bubbled through Rukia and she had flatly refused to talk. Machida never brought up any talk about Rukia's bruises, but she felt his gaze through her whenever he narrowed his eyes at her injuries. She kept her cuts hidden under full sleeves, but that couldn't be done to all of the bruises she had. She knew Kuro was struggling to ask her about it. How could a father ask his daughter whether her mother, the woman he had once loved, had hurt her or not? And just like that the days passed. Kuro began homeschooling Rukia. She was amazed by the amount of effort he put into making her understand. She didn't know from where he found the time to teach her and work for his job, but somehow, somewhere he did. If this was called caring, then Rukia was being cared for. She couldn't believe it, even thinking about being loved made her feel giddy and special. Was that normal? Their house's walls adorned her paintings, all the 10 frames and the papers and sketches lying around. Rukia hadn't received this level of satisfaction in ages. Machida seemed to really believe in her. And when he thought she wasn't noticing, he did things, the small little things that matter, to make her feel better. When she was sleeping, he would come and gently check her bruises. She found out that the channel that ran her favorite TV program, The Adventures of Chappie, was added to the cable. Every now and then Kuro would try out new looks for her room, as he said the room seemed too desolate. He seemed to be desperate to fill in for all of the years he'd been absent from her life. Also, he had been preparing her for the entrance exam for one of the most prestigious universities of Japan, Saratai Academy. Rukia had given up, but seeing how much Kuro was doing, she's decided to put in some effort for his sake. All of a sudden she seemed to get better. The numbers and letters were twisted and turned, but they didn't seem to fly anymore. And when Rukia had said, "There's no way I'm getting into Saratai, I'm dyslexic," to Kuro, he had laughed and said, "Well, do something about it. It's not incurable. Fight it and win. Go to the other side and get a taste of victory." She just rolled her eyes and said, "Dad, just say, nothing is impossible." Why the whole inspirational speech? "Oh, some things are impossible, sweetie," he'd replied seriously. "I just think dyslexia is an extremely bad example for it." And so, she'd decided to prove too was. July 15, 2010, 5:45 p.m. 50 seats are left. 50 seats are open. Only 50 seats. Only and only 50 seats. Only and only and only dash. Just open the letter, Rukia, you're killing me. Kuro was hopping on his feet, looking more excited than her as she gripped the manila envelope that said, Saratai Academy, tightly in her tiny hands. She looked over at him skeptically. "You do know that if I rank after 50th place I won't get the seat, don't you? If you don't open it, you'll never know." "But I dash." "Ah," he grabbed the envelope and ran across the room away from her. "Dad, no. Give it back." Rukia shrieked as he ripped it open. "No. No way, I'm opening it, and if I dash," Kuro's voice trailed away as his eyes fell on the sheet. He didn't say anything, just stared. "What?" "Nothing." "Dad." "What?" Still nothing. "Dad, say something. Did I get in?" Kuro looked up at her with shocked eyes and slowly shook his head. No. Rukia slumped down on the cushioned sofa, feeling hollow. She didn't get in. She hadn't gotten in. I didn't, I worked so hard," she whispered, looking up at her father's unreadable face. "I didn't get in." Kuro didn't say anything and was keeping a blank face. That was when Rukia narrowed her eyes at him. "Dad." He was trying so hard not to laugh so hard. "Dad." He burst out laughing, hugging her. "I was kidding, you got in, 37th place. My Rukia got in. You got in." And all of the sadness, everything went off. She didn't care as she hugged her father, realizing that she had also accomplished something in her life. That she also had a road to walk on, all her doors weren't closed. She wondered what Ami and his Anna would say if they were with her right then. But then, at that moment, as she watched her father chant her name and celebrate, she didn't give a damn. Perfect moments. "So you're from Kakura too?" "That's a coincidence," Rukia said, sipping her coffee. It was the morning of April 6th. The campus was buzzing with all the morning energy, and had already been emptied except for the few students who were staying back. Rukia sat in the cafeteria with Ichigo, who was presenting her with the breakfast he owed her after how she had helped him in the night. He eyed the plates in front of her. So far she had finished hashed brown potatoes, toasted bread, rice ball and a grilled cheese sandwich. Now she was sipping coffee. "I guess you were hungry." She looked, "Or maybe I just wanted to waste your money." He frowned. That's really not fair after what you did last night. Rukia smirked. She hadn't particularly liked him the previous night when he'd constantly bossed her around while she looked out for his crazed fangirls. When his annoying jabs had become too much to handle, Rukia had coolly led him straight into a crowd of female fans, and his life had been hell for the next 2 hours as he was showered with gifts and flowers and phone numbers. Ichigo had not let Rukia live in peace either though, and had banged on her hostel room's door till 10 p.m., yelling out to irritate her until the warden had dragged him away. Rukia had been far from irritated, she'd been laughing her butt off from the other side of the door. The guy had really made her day. But now morning had arrived and everything was forgotten. Ichigo had come to her, mumbling something about owing her breakfast, so here they were. "Good morning, minions." Renji's voice came. He grinned, sitting down on the empty chair. "I heard your voice echoing through the campus last night, Ichigo. Something about fighting for your freedom. What was that all about?" Ichigo eyed Rukia and scowled, saying nothing. "And a little birdie tells me you were at the girls' hostels till 10. Tut, tut, you know the time limit is 9 o'clock, Kurosaki. Which girl were you banging?" "Shut up." Ichigo pushed him off the chair angrily and the red-haired youth fell to the ground with an almighty crash. Rukia laughed as Renji made to get up, frowning. "Somebody's sensitive. You should lay off him. He's meeting his dad today, he's extra annoyed." Rukia said. Renji eyed her. "How do you know about his mental dad? Wait, how are you even friends? I thought you hated him, Rukia. You pinky promised you would never fall for his charms." Ichigo choked on his own coffee and rapped the guy on his head. "Shut up. Rukia, you promised." "I know. I still hate him, don't worry." Rukia said, rolling her eyes. "It's just that I'm going to be on the same train as him, so we thought it'd be fun if we travel together." Ichigo rubbed his head and nodded, eyeing the petite girl. There was something different about her, maybe that was why he hadn't refused the offer of traveling together even when she was clearly very annoying. They'd even exchanged phone numbers. Oh. Renji's eyes fell down on the food in front of her. "For someone so small, you sure eat a lot, Kuchiki." Whack. "Shut up." Ami entered the room, a tray in her hands, which had a cup of herbal tea and some biscuits. Her eyes not leaving the form on the bed, she set the tray down on a nearby stool. "Eat up." "I'm not hungry," Hisana replied in a frail voice, ignoring the stab of pain that shot through her body and forcing a smile on her face to reassure her mother. The summer season was going now, and it was somewhere between pre-monsoon and rainy. She looked out the window at the scores of buildings outside and the leaves swaying. Hisana's chest ached, a slow, increasing ache that would soon penetrate her. She knew she wasn't going to recover, even if Ami went ahead of herself to go and consult millions of doctors. "Drink this at least. You need something in your system," Ami said, handing the cup to her daughter with trembling hands. Hisana reluctantly took it and continued to gaze out the window. "Mom, how's Rukia?" Ami stiffened at the mention of her younger daughter's name, as she always had. "Well, she managed to land herself in Saratai, so she'll be fine," she replied in a flat voice. "You haven't talked to her at all, have you?" "Of course I haven't. Why should I? I call her father every month, she's fine." Hisana smiled a little and looked around at her room. Now the walls were full of posters of actors and movies. Rukia's paintings had them. The wall looked lifeless, like something had been ripped off of them, dreary and blank. The doorbell rang, and Ami stood up. "I'll get it." Softly, she brushed her hand on top of Hisana's raven hair, ruffled them lightly and walked away. Hisana's smile dropped and she looed over at Rukia's empty bed. It had been properly made by Ami, which was so unlike Rukia because she never made her bed, just to have something she could irritate Ami by. "I miss you, little sister," Hisana said softly. "Believe it or not, but I do." "Hisana, you have a visitor," Ami said, a faint trace of a smile on her lips as she disappeared down the corridor. Hizana's eyes went wide as she stared at the guest who closed the door behind him and set a large bouquet of roses down on the stool next to the tray. He came to sit down by Hizana's bedside on the chair. Her face beamed and she put on a big smile. The guest was a dark-haired, handsome young man with a straight, cold face like an ivory statue. Byakuya. You may drop the fake smile now. Hizana giggled. I'm not fake smiling, believe me. I'm so happy to see you. That's nice to know, he replied, watching her closely. Has there been any progress in your condition? Hizana laid back on her pillow, pouting. I'm not great, but I'm not worse, so I'm fine for now. That's that relieving. Why the sudden visit? Hizana asked curiously. Byakuya couldn't help but notice how perfect the way her lips rounded to make a pout, and eyes darkened. Her hair fell down in loose strands, by the sides of her face while she looked at him with innocence. Only she could look so beautiful even when she was sick. I simply wished to see you, he said carefully. For someone so proud, cold, and confident as Byakuya, feeling nervous, was not a familiar feeling. He knew why he was there, he knew that he wanted to do it, to say it right then. To see her in that condition, lying in bed, ill for the past so many weeks and yet still breaking into a smile so effortlessly that it hurt Byakuya to see his classmate in that condition. Of course, she had always been more than a friend to him. At first, when she was in her first year at college, she seemed helplessly cheerful, bubbly, and optimistic. It had sickened Byakuya. But then, he'd noticed that even though she smiled a lot, her eyes were always sad. Now that she had changed, he wanted the previous Hizana back. Simply. That's news to me, Hizana said, laughing. You never visit friends' houses simply. Why do you think so? You need a motive to do something like that. To just visit a friend because you want to is not motive enough for you. Hizana giggled. Sometimes I used to have doubts whether you were a human or not. Byakuya's eye twitched. He wanted to say everything he hadn't. Love was not one of the easiest things for him. I did come here for a particular reason, he began quietly. Hizana looked up at him questioningly. Yes. It is not something that I can make you understand. I can't promise you much either, but what I'm about to say. Well, what I hope I can say and promise you. You like me, don't you? Hizana asked impatiently. Byakuya froze for a millisecond, then looked up to meet Hizana's twinkling eyes. She wore a smile, but that was it. Her expression was neutral. He searched her face for any clues, but finding not much, cleared his throat and looked up. I was going for love, actually. Hizana squealed and laughed. Her face glowed, showing pure, undiluted happiness. Byakuya stared at her sudden transformation after having recovered from the shock of it. Hizana had never ceased to surprise the heck out of him. After she had calmed down a little, he handed her cup of tea that she'd put down earlier, and said in a careful voice, Do I take that as a positive reaction then? I've been waiting for you to say that to me for months. Months, Byakuya, of course you take that as a positive reaction. You really do amaze me. She laughed softly. He stared at her glowering face, then leaned forward and took the cup from her hands. He set it down once again on the tray as Hizana watched in confusion. What? Her voice broke off as his arms circled her waist and his lips captured hers. She gasped. Byakuya's lips weren't moving, he seemed too nervous to make a move, so he had just placed his mouth on hers. Smiling, she held his collar and kissed him. It was a minute later that he began to kiss her back, and Hizana let herself melt in the moment. Colors and promises. Rukia was standing near the door, lost in thought, as the train rocked back and forth. Her cheeks were flushed pink from the wind hitting her face and her hair were flying everywhere. She hugged herself, wondering how she should react when she saw Kuro. It had been a while since they had met. She had been unable to return home for her Christmas holidays, being busy with her own stuff, and even though they talked to each other on the phone, somehow, it felt weird. What the hell do you think you're doing? A hand reached out and grabbed Rukia's shirt, pulling her back away from the door, get back before you fall, you idiot. Ichigo was glaring down at her as she staggered on the train. Do you want to die? Rukia shook him off, frowning. I can take care of myself, she snapped. Oh, please. Ichigo rolled his eyes. One big blow of the wind and you'll fly into the sunlight, midget. Rukia made to say something but all of her thoughts trailed away when she caught sight of the station nearing them. Her heart stopped, violet eyes going wide. A happiness she didn't show she could be capable of feeling flooded in the pit of her stomach as she clutched Ichigo's shirt. How should she react? Happy, excited, freaked, bubbly, normal. How? Should she wave or smile or something? What if she couldn't find Kuro in the crowd of the station? Oh God, oh DMN, she was going to see Kuro, she was back, she was home. She felt like jumping up and down right there on the train as it turned around the bend. We're back, Ichigo. I'm back. She squealed in excitement. She grabbed the front of his shirt and began shaking him out of his wits. We're home. Ichigo staggered and caught the handheld, pushing her hands off. DMN it, woman, I know. She laughed and hopped off to stick to the door once again, leaning out eagerly and looking out to see where her father was on the platform. Get back, you idiot. Ichigo hissed, pulling her back once again, but she just grinned stupidly and looked back at him. We're back. Ichigo couldn't help but smile a little at the innocent glow that was radiating from her face. Who knew someone could be so happy just by coming back? Yep. He said, running a hand through his bright orange hair that shone in the sunlight. He looked out to catch sight of his father, Ichigo Kurosaki, dancing there on the platform, a chauffeur hat on his head and a big board which said, for the orange-haired idiot. Ichigo sighed. Oh yeah, we're back. Over here, Rukia. Kuro engulfed Rukia in a hug as the crowd pushed and pulled on the station. Oh, it's so good to see you again. I swear you look taller. Kuro hugged her tightly. Rukia laughed and felt warmth seep through her. Oi, midget, came a call behind her. Ichigo was making his way towards her in the crowd and set her luggage down behind her. What have you put in there, rocks? Kuro frowned and looked over Rukia's shoulder at the orange-haired guy. Excuse me? He went coldly. What did you just call my daughter? Huh? Ichigo looked up and froze as realization hit him. Oh, I didn't mean it like that. Oh no, Rukia and I are great friends, we call each other names all the times. She calls me Strawberry, the little devil. Isn't that right, Rukia? Ichigo gave a loud forced laugh, sweat dropping as he ruffled up Rukia's hair like one would a child's. She frowned and flinched away from his hand, straightening her hair down before smirking at the expression on his face. Meet my dad, Ichigo. She said, as Kuro narrowed his eyes at Ichigo. Ichigo rubbed the back of his head. Yeah, it's nice to dash. Ichigo. Ichigo cursed. Rukia and Kuro leapt away as a man tackled Ichigo to the ground of the platform while the crowd stared. There was an almighty crash as Ichigo and the man took the luggage down with them. Rukia blinked down. Ichigo's eye was twitching, and his voice was a low growl as he looked up at her from underneath the man. Meet my dad, Rukia. The fight that ensued was quite entertaining in Rukia's opinion. After what seemed like days, Ichigo and his dad, although clearly Ichigo had to be messing around with her when he said Ishin was truly his father, finally called up a truce and said goodbye to them, and Rukia and Kuro made to return home. Rukia looked around as they entered the house. You shifted, she said, surprised. Kuro smiled. Yeah. Got a new job, got sick of the bloody apartment, saved up some of the money and rented this out. The house was more spacious and breezy as she stepped inside. It was unnaturally white and she didn't know why, but the blankness of the walls made her flinch in discomfort. It made her feel like if she stepped the wrong way or even touched it too roughly, the walls might come crumbling down. She didn't know how such a clean, pure color could make a place look so haunted, but it did. Rukia even noticed that Kuro had bought more furniture. Apart from the furniture, the house was almost completely empty. Where are my paintings, was what Rukia asked as soon as she had taken everything in. She turned to face Kuro, who was busy fidgeting with the coffee maker. He looked up and blinked at her. Your what? My paintings. Where are they? Rukia looked around frantically, but the walls were completely white, so sickeningly white she wanted to splash paint on them blindly. She wondered why Kuro hadn't put up her frames there and panicked. What if he'd realized they were no good and thrown them? What if they'd gotten ruined during the packing and moving? What if? Oh, they're still packed in the storeroom with the other decorative stuff. Kuro sent her a distracted smile. Don't worry, they're fine. I want to see them. Sure, honey, as soon as I find the key. His voice trailed off. The jug crashed to the floor and he jumped, letting out a stream of curses. Rukia sighed, looking around. She hadn't been able to take all of her work to Saratai, so most of the paintings, the ones that had been the best, had been left back with Kuro. She wanted to see them badly, so badly it hurt. It had been a year since she'd seen them. It was a little pathetic that she literally lived for some splash of color on a piece of canvas, but throughout those years she'd lived with Ami and his Anna. Throughout those years she'd spent hating her own existence. She'd painted, and it was these paintings that portrayed that pain. That reminded her of everything and made it real. That told her to get up whenever she was thrown down. So hell yeah, she wanted to see them badly. There are some out in your bedroom, if you want to see them. Kuro called out, his head under the slab as he searched for hell knows what. Rukia jumped and ran inside her new room and fell on her bed, grabbing the frames that lay there. Over the year, she had stopped cutting herself. Her bruises had healed, and her cuts were old and lay in the underside of her arm, forgotten and painless. It was like starting afresh, and as she gazed at every slide of the brush, the swirl of the yellows merging with the red in her paintings, she felt herself relax. Reminiscing? Kuro's voice came from the doorway. She turned and saw him leaning against the door, holding a mug. Coffee? He asked again. She shook her head. No caffeine for me. I want to sleep tonight. Kuro shrugged. Suit yourself. But we're going to some fun place tonight to celebrate. Rukia groaned and buried her face into the pillow. Do we have to? Of course we have to. You survived a whole year in that place. No more painting, no more sitting in your room and sketching away your sorrows. You're a genius now. Rukia frowned a little, but at the excitement on her father's face, sighed and nodded. Fine. Rukia wasn't particularly enjoying herself. After 3 weeks of studying and spending most of her time in the library, shacked up and reading, Rukia had really looked forward to returning home. And just lying there on the bed, chatting with Kuro. But something had changed. Kuro wasn't himself anymore. His jokes seemed forced, his smile strained and his hugs unnaturally hollow. They just couldn't make conversation anymore. Rukia wondered why he had taken the trouble of dressing up and going out to a restaurant to eat when he clearly looked exhausted. Every minute he was rubbing his eyes and muffling his yawns. So, how was your time there? He asked. Must have been hard with your dyslexia and everything. Oh no, you helped a lot, she smiled. He looked pleased with himself and leaned back in his chair. Now tell me about this young man, Ichigo Kurosaki. Rukia laughed and proceeded to tell him about how the two had met. Kuro frowned and began to look disapproving, but that only made Rukia more amused. Halfway through her chatter, however, she noticed that Kuro was no longer paying her any attention. She surveyed him with careful eyes. He looked stressed and pale, with large bags under his eyes, which were bloodshot and sleep-deprived. Dad dash? He asked, closing his eyes and leaning back. Are you okay? Oh, I'm fine. His eyes shot open and he leaned forward, breaking into an uneasy smile. Sorry, it's just some work thing dash. Rukia didn't say anything, and after dinner, they walked out. It was dark, around 9:30 as they made their way to call for a cab. When they did find one, however, Kuro opened the door and let Rukia climb in before leaning forward and handing her a few bills. She blinked up at him in confusion. What's this? Money. That I'm just gonna stop by for a drink, work's sorta having a toll on me, Kuro said, hesitating, the money's for the cab, and if you wanna buy something, just in case. Knock yourself out. I'll be back in an hour. She looked at him, worry across her eyes as she took the money and he shut the door close. I promise, he smiled, and waved as the cab whizzed away, Rukia's confused face slowly disappearing behind the glass as it turned around the corner. Kuro stared after the yellow vehicle. His smile dropped, his hand still raised in goodbye. The previous year hadn't been the best for him. He didn't know why, but he seemed to be lazing away the days, just surviving on air, in and out, in and out. He tucked his hands in his pockets and turned, walking over to the familiar rickety bar that stood, cramped in a corner of the street, so tiny you would miss it if you didn't look properly. Instead of most pubs where the noise and music was deafening, this place was run down, with only a few customers sipping their beers and minding their own business. Frank Sinatra's voice swooned in the background as usual as Kuro sat down on his seat. The usual, he said wearily to the bartender, who nodded. Watcher, Machida Dash. The painting's a beauty by the way, called out Ganju, a massive man who sat in a corner and often met Kuro at the bar. He pointed at a fairly large painting that was hanging on the wall of the bar. It was a picture of a hazy face, the paint soft and swirling around its sides. It looked as if it was a reflection in the water, hazy and magnifies, flawed but beautiful. Where'd you find it? Ganju asked. Kuro took a gulp of his beer and laughed bitterly. Rukia felt like she could conquer the world. She hadn't felt so light-headed in a long time. The liveliness of the day seemed to add even brighter colors to the scene that stood in front of her as she took in a deep breath, her face betraying her joy. Behind her, still busy climbing up the hill, was a furious, panting Ichigo Kurosaki. His black t-shirt was ruffled, and his jeans dusty as he groped round for rocks and pulled himself up, shooting glares at the midget standing above him. Climb up, lazy ass. What's taking you so long? She called down to him impatiently, her sundress flying in the summer breeze. The comment was enough to set his time bomb off. Maybe if you hadn't stepped on my head to climb up, I wouldn't have lost my balance, rolled all the way down the friggin' hill and made to start all over again. Ichigo yelled. She huffed and folded her arms, quit whining. I thought you were a man, so act like one. And I thought you were a lady, she heard him mutter. Rukia picked up a rock and flung it in her hands. Did you say something? She said sweetly. His wide, horrified eyes stared at the rock she was toying with, before he mumbled something and continued to climb up. Didn't quite catch that, Kurosaki. I said I can't believe I agreed with this stupid, crazy but idea. She shrugged, you were the one who wanted to see me paint. Yeah, excuse me if I didn't know climbing a freakin' hill was part of the process. Oh, please, you suggested this place. Get over it already and come up. It's just a small hill, I've gone through much worse to get a scene to paint. Yeah, but you don't count 'cause you're mental. A mock throw from the rock in her hands was enough to set him straight and climbing fast, muttering and groaning but making sure she didn't hear a word of it. The crazy woman wouldn't be trusted. He looked up to see her back towards him and knew she'd resorted to watching the scene of the town. He didn't know what he'd been thinking when he'd told her the hill was the place for her when she'd asked him when she could get a good view for a painting. It had all started the day he'd called her to congratulate her for making it to the top 10. The results of their first-year exams had arrived 1 month into their summer vacation, and truth be told, he had been itching to find an excuse to call her ever since he'd gotten her number from her. So naturally, the minute the letter labeled Saratai arrived and he ripped it open, the first thing he did was dial her number, which he felt ashamed to admit he knew by heart, even though he had never actually called her before. It was stupid to think that he needed to find a reason to call her. It was as if his pride wouldn't allow him to call her simply because the reason was that he wanted to talk to her, because no way, that reason was just ridiculous. Why would he want to talk to someone like her, of all people? And then he felt sick with himself for thinking that way, and wondered if he should just swallow his pride and call her. And then he would curse himself for thinking so much about her and decide against it. And then the cycle would repeat all over again. That is, until he got that beautiful, cursive, printed letter from Saratai, giving him just the right excuse to dial her number, so he had. Hello. He took a deep breath and dodged as Ishin ran to hug him. Hey, Rukia. It's Ichigo, remember? There was a pause in the line before she answered, a hint of amusement in her voice. Orange hair, hides from girls in janitor's closets, has a crazy father. Oh no, I don't remember him at all. He balled his fists. I hate you. Okay, pause. You called to tell me that? No. I just he rubbed his neck, watching as Ishin started exclaiming something in the next room. Honestly, he was surprised he could even hear Rukia's voice in all that commotion. About that, got your results? Oh, yes, I did. Congratulations to you, by the way. He couldn't help grinning, right back at ya. By how much did I beat you? 1 point. There was silence before she answered in a sulking voice. 0.4, actually. He smirked, shame. Ever since she'd offered to meet up for the first time, she didn't have to organize a second meeting. He didn't know where she lived, and neither did she, but it was a clear message, unspoken between them, to meet there under the broken-down shed, where she'd asked to meet him the first time. So, he always waited, and she always came. Admittedly, the view wasn't half bad from up the hill, it was actually pretty amazing, you could see the entire town from up there. But Ichigo hadn't come up the hill since a long time. It had been dangerous, forbidden territory because he couldn't risk himself to go up there and take a trip down memory lane. Not now. Not ever. But when Rukia had asked him, he'd immediately recommended this place first. Also, he'd been a little surprised she didn't know about it. It was an ideal picnic spot during weekends at Kakura. It was almost as if she was new in town, which she obviously wasn't because she said she lived there with her dad. By the time he reached the top, muddy and clapping his dusty hands together, Rukia had already set her paints open and on the grass, ready for use. It had been torture to climb up with all her supplies. The woman, who was currently lost in translation watching the view, had made him climb up and down twice to bring her stuff. He grumbled and dropped his bottle of water down on the grass, panting. And because she'd used him as a ladder, he'd had to climb thrice. Oi! Earth to Rukia, he snapped a little too roughly. She jumped and her head shot towards him. Oh, good. Little, whiny strawberry is finally here. He scowled. Shut up and get to work. Why do you want to see me paint so badly? You talk about it all the time. I want to know what the fuss is all about, he replied, sitting down on a patch of grass and watching as she continued to look at the scene. She seemed to drink in everything, the buildings, the miniature people and dogs, the trees, the cars, the birds, and just as abruptly as she'd started, she stopped and plopped down next to him with her canvas board and began. Ichigo didn't say anything, just watched. He'd never seen anyone paint like this before. She seemed to melt and lose herself. Her hands were working by themselves, the tinge of blue, the strokes of green before merging them and then the yellow, before she decided with a pinch to her nose that she didn't want it, and made it disappear with the green and a hint of water. The brush floated on canvas like magic, and he just watched, a little smile at the cute, determined expression. Her face seemed to change every time she started something new, new scene, new color, new anything. She frowned, pouted a little, liked her lips, giggled and bowed her head so close he couldn't see the picture at all. It was a little strange, and Ichigo shook his head, trying to keep his head straight, trying not to think, trying not to. Ichigo, lend Karen a hand, called the sweet voice of his mom. Ichigo puffed his chest at his mother's command and ran over to his little sister, who was climbing the hill, grunting and gasping, her milk teeth gritted in determination and short black hair continuously coming in front of her eyes. No, I can do it by myself. Karen slapped Ichigo's hand away angrily. But I'm Dash. No. Ichigo frowned and folded his arms. You're gonna fall down, you know. No, I'm not. Yuzu climbed up all by herself too. No, Mom helped her up. She just didn't tell you that. Karen scowled before sticking her tongue out at her elder brother. Yeah, but I'm strong, I can do it on my dash. Ishin Kurosaki rocket atawa aak. Ichigo leapt out of the way as Karen shrieked. Their dad had come rushing up from behind her, pushing her up by her bum and on top of the hill. Karen was yelling as Ichigo ran back, laughing at her. Serves you right. Ishin, you scared her, their mum scolded him as she nursed a crying Yuzu in her arms. Ishin immediately hung his head and Karen smirked. Grinning, Ichigo fell on his mother's lap next to Yuzu, and let her hug him. He was so proud of their mum, she was so strong and amazing, she could even climb up the whole hill without any help. When he grew up, he'd be just like her, strong and amazing and protective. Watching. Ichigo shook his head a little as Rukia's voice pulled him out of the memory. He looked sideways at her. What? She glanced at him in curiosity. I said for someone who climbed up a hill to watch me paint, you're not really watching. Oh. Rukia didn't look offended. Instead, she turned her head back to her canvas, her head tilted. This is a really nice place, she said. Ichigo grunted in response, putting his arm on his knee and the other behind him to prop himself up. You know what I love most about it? What? He looked at her. It's so quiet. Her eyes softened down as she painted. I mean, you can see the entire town from here. If you were down there, in the middle of it, it would be chaos, cars running around, people ordering, children crying, but from up here, you see it in a completely different perspective. You see the bigger picture of things. That what? Ichigo snorted sarcastically, that the world is complete chaos. No, she said simply, that even in that chaos, you can find something beautiful. He didn't say anything, maybe because he didn't want to tell her how wrong she was. She was spouting nonsense. The world was full of chaos, life was full of chaos, and that was the end of it. All you did was work and distract yourself in the hope that one day it would stop hurting, but it never did. And then you got sucked into everyday duties and routines and it was buried deep inside, and you got the privilege to forget it all. But the minute the chaos stopped, the minute you sat in your room in the deafening silence, it all came crashing back to you. And it hurt like hell. Do you come here often? She asked him. I used to. But not anymore. Why not? He shrugged. Got busy with studies, I guess. She laughed. That's not an excuse. The light breeze seemed to blow through her raven hair and fill her face with a sort of glow Ichigo hadn't seen in all the times he'd been with her. In fact, that's even more of a reason to come up here. It just dash. She looked over at him with glittering eyes. Doesn't it clear your head? Calm you down dash. I look at the small people walking down there and I feel like God, watching them from the skies. She'd changed so quickly in such little time. He was glad, he was truly glad she looked so happy, but... Yeah, well, this place kinda has the opposite effect on me, he replied with gritted teeth. She searched his eyes and quietened down. For a moment, he thought she was going to ask why, but he was thankful when she didn't. Frank Sinatra's voice swooned overhead as the two sat down. Ichigo slid into a seat with his drink as Rukia looked at him skeptically. Ever since their talk on the hill, he hadn't said much. She'd seen the frustration on his face, but it was the flickering hurt in his eyes that stopped her from saying anything. Ichigo had asked if she wanted to grab a drink and she'd nodded, telling him of the pub nearby she'd seen Kuro go in often. Yes, she had followed him on a number of occasions, big deal, and Ichigo had agreed. It wasn't helping much though. Rukia could see that he still sat stiffly, his face set in a deep scowl and hand clutching his drink so tightly his knuckles were white. The whole place was musty and old and smelt of rotten wood as Rukia looked around for something to do, something to cheer him up with. She noticed as the music changed and looked up at the soft piano notes that began to ring through the place. Ichigo sighed in relief. The Frank Sinatra thing had really been getting to his head. Play now. He leaned back and closed his eyes, trying to push all of his irritation in the back of his mind. Just then, small fingers curled around his hand. His eyes shot open and he stared at Rukia, who was standing up and looking at him with a raised brow. "What are you doing?" he asked suspiciously. "Get up." "What?" "Get up," she smiled, "we're dancing." He shook her off. No. Why couldn't she just go back to being quiet and depressing? He cringed as she stamped her foot down in anger. "No, get up. Go away, Rukia. You'll feel better, I promise. No. Her lips thinned. "Get on your butt, Ichigo Kurosaki." Ichigo cursed. What was her problem? He let out a loud groan as she pulled him on his feet and put an arm around to secure him. She laughed as they swayed. "I don't like this," he scowled. "Come on, just give it a try." Ichigo raised his head up at the ceiling. "What can I say that'll allow me to go back to my seat? People are staring." "Nothing," she replied honestly before looking up into his eyes softly. "Just let go." He gazed down into her warm eyes and his stomach swooped. He didn't know what to say, and walking back to his booth, which looked so far, seemed so pointless all of a sudden. His legs felt like jelly, and he sighed, arm wrapping around her waist so that he could pull her close to his chest. He hated that smug smile she was giving him, but something about the warmth of having her in his arms made him feel ridiculously safe, as if he was in his mother's arms once again. The sun set outside the window, but no one cared. Ichigo twirled her around and then pulled her close, his arm wrapping around her once again so that they were swaying on the spot, her back pressed into his front. He lowered his head and buried his face in her hair, inhaling her breezy shampoo and feeling dazed. It was a very empty gesture, and he was glad she couldn't see the pink hue that adorned his cheeks. He felt his insides relax in relief and closed his eyes. He felt warm hugging her like that, like a cocoon. "What's up with you?" he asked softly, holding her tight. She turned in his arms to face him once again. "What do you mean? You come here, miles away from your home to do a painting. You don't talk to anyone, half the time you're dreaming away. One minute you're upset, the next you're jumping around and being annoying. Soda, what's up with you?" She laughed. "Nothing is up with me. And it's perfectly normal to come miles from my home to do a dash." She suddenly stopped and Ichigo felt her freeze. "Rukia." Ichigo's voice suddenly seemed distant. Rukia couldn't see, she couldn't breathe. Her wide eyes stared at the painting on the wall in front of her. Everything seemed to be in slow motion, the colors faded from the world, and suddenly Ichigo's arms didn't feel safe. No, they felt tight, they were suffocating her. Trembling, Rukia struggled and shook herself away from his embrace, staggering forward. Rukia." Ichigo looked stunned. Had he done something wrong? "Are you?" She needed to breathe, she needed air desperately, she needed to get out from there. One more minute was tightening her nerves. She was trembling, she couldn't stay. That was her painting. What was her painting doing there? She'd even signed it. Why was it there? Wild, terrible thoughts were running through her head. She needed to see Kuro. She'd seen him come here, to this very pub. Oh, God, she couldn't breathe. What had she done? What had Kuro done? Why had he done this? She couldn't even think straight. She clutched her mouth as tears began to sting her eyes. How had this even happened? How could Kuro? They had been locked, he had said they had been locked away. Then why? Rukia. Ichigo was panicking, but she was already panicked. She couldn't stay here, she couldn't. It made her sick to even be in the same room as her. "I'm sorry," she choked to Ichigo. I have to. I don't dash." She was rambling, she didn't care, she just had to run, get away from there. Ichigo couldn't move as the rest of the customers stared at the two in mild curiosity. "Rukia," he tried to reach out for her before she could escape, but his hands caught thin air. He jumped forward, but she was too far now. "Rukia, wait." But he could only watch in shock and confusion as she stumbled across the wooden floor and disappeared out into the darkness of the night. When it's all said and done, I'll be just a speck in the galaxy. Floating far far away by gravity. You tell me it's not possible. No way that we could break. Like falling stars, like crashing cars. Like falling stars over your head. Chapter 9. Red. You sold my paintings. Rukia exclaimed, slamming the door against the wall as she burst in. The clock ticked silently on the wall as Kuro froze from where he'd been sitting on the armchair, a glass of brandy in his hand. He slowly turned to look at his daughter's flushed face, his eyes wide. What? My paintings, Dad. The ones that are supposedly locked up in the attic? She snarled, her hands balling into fists as she slammed the front door behind her. Kuro couldn't move as he stared at her. Panic, horror, anger, shocked that he didn't know which emotion to allow to envelope him as he stared numbly at Rukia, who was shaking with rage, barely controlling herself as her violet eyes burned into him. How did she get to know? Rukia, Did you even care to ask me? Sweetie, you don't dash. Don't you dare call me sweetie, Rukia threatened, wrenching her hand away from his grip as he tried to reach out for her. Don't you dare you. Kuro sighed, running a hand through his hair. Rukia, I needed the money. You could have asked me. She exclaimed, making him cringe. His eyes were unusually bright, tears threatening to fall as she shouted mindlessly, but this was not the time. This was not the time nor the place to have a mental breakdown. I would have done it all, if you'd just asked me. He looked at her irritably. Asked you how? You were gone to Saratai, busy while your studies. So you decided you had the right to sell my paintings, she shouted derisively, once again pushing him off as he tried to hold her. Kuro was growing frustrated. What was the big deal anyway? They'd just been some drawings. Of course Rukia was attached to them, but she was the one who had made them. She was bound to be attached to them. Look, I know what I did was wrong, Rukia. I'll make it up to you and pay you back, okay? He said, I just need some. Pay me back. Rukia shrieked. Her voice was so high now that Kuro could barely hear her. He winced, her shrill voice piercing through his already fatigued brain. He could feel the blood rushing up his face as he tried to control himself. He had never seen her so furious. You think I care about the money? For God's sake then, what the F, do you want me to do? Kuro shouted, his temper rising. They're just paintings, Rukia. You can make new ones. She stared at him like he'd gone mad. No, I cannot make new ones, she yelled back. They were 6 years' worth of work for me, did you know that? It's not about the bloody paintings, it's about what they represent that matters so much to me. How many others have you sold behind my back? Kuro stood up, glaring at her. His insides were buzzing, all of his senses seemed to be magnified as he glared at Rukia with all the hatred he could muster. His skin tingled and he suddenly had a strong urge to hit something and cause immense pain. I am your father, Rukia, he said with gritted teeth. You are still a minor, so whatever money you make is rightfully dash. If she shouts one more time, I'll. It's not the money, you dash. Shut up. He finally shouted, her voice causing pain to shoot through his head, and increasing his headache. You think I've been enjoying my life with it? With you? You think I've spent the FNG money in luxuries and had the time of my life? As Kuro's volume slowly increased, he took a step closer to Rukia, and she began to back away. Rukia, for the first time, felt scared of her father. It's not been a bloody picnic, paying for both of us, Rukia. Your tuition fees. Your hostel charges. You're this. You're that dash. It's just like Ami to drop you on my FNG head so that she wouldn't have to take the burden for your bloody college money. Rukia retreated, shock etched upon her face as she stared at her father. She could catch the slight whiff of alcohol in his breath as he closed the gap between them, and she froze, her breath catching in her throat. He was drunk. All my FNG life, when I needed you, when I fucking begged her to just let me meet you and his Anna, she refused. And now? Now that I don't need any of you, she just up and leaves so that I'm left to care for you. What kind of wife does that? Kuro spat, gripping his glass as he swayed a little drunkenly. She thinks she can call on me any FNG day she wants to and I'll help her. Rukia was only too familiar with drunk parents and the things such fights led to. But to think that right now, she could look into Kuro's blazing eyes and clearly see his burning hatred for her seemed to make her want to die a little bit more. Well, I bloody won't. He smashed the glass against the opposite wall, and it shattered a few feet away from where Rukia was standing, shaking, her rage replaced by fear for her life. Kuro strode over to her in 2 steps and gripped her shoulders, pinning her against the wall, his face dangerously close to hers. All her muscles screamed in agony as they hit against the solid bricks behind her. The amount of alcohol that was wafting from him made her want to GG, and there it was again, that feeling of helplessness as she stood there, pressed between her father and the wall. You're useless. She was suffocating, she was panicking, she had to get out. How could she do this to herself? How could she be so FNG weak that she couldn't even defend herself? You listen to me, and you listen to me well. Kuro spat in her face, his eyes were bloodshot and he looked deranged. I'll do whatever the F I want to do with your paintings, and you better keep that little temper tantrum to yourself, you got that? You're happy Kuro. He's FNG gone. Do you want me to be that happy guy again? She trembled as he traced a finger along the lining of her jaw. Tell me. You want the happy me back. She wanted to vomit, something had gone terrible wrong with him. He seemed to have spiraled out of control, the way he had during his last few days before his divorce with Ami, the time when Rukia had been so young, and yet still somehow remembered every little detail of. Her body shook as she nodded. Kuro smirked and gripped her arm tightly, twisting it a little, enough to make her cry out in pain. She felt that feeling shoot through her again. Useless. Useless, useless, useless. Defend yourself. Protect yourself. All you can do is cry. Useless. Then know your place, Rukia. Be in your FNG limits and never use that voice with me again. He dropped down to whisper in her ear, making her freeze. Then I'll be the happy Kuro. You just want to make your daddy happy, don't you? Sweetie. She didn't reply, shaking as he let go of her. His smirk widened and he backed away. Involuntarily, and hoping it wasn't audible, Rukia let out a breath of relief when he put some distance between them. Good. Now, go and change into something more comfortable, he smiled. I'll make dinner. That night, she made a decision. No more. She couldn't do this anymore. She didn't want to do this. She felt disgusted and pathetic and used. You can't seem to do anything right. No wonder everyone's angry with you. It was just a few minutes later as she got inside her room, locking the door behind her, that she reached her decision. Her eyes filled with tears and her legs shook, failing and sending her crashing to the floor. She wanted to scream, and so scream she did. If Kuro heard her, he showed no sign of stopping her. Over and over she dug her nails inside the flesh of her thighs, curling up on the floor and screaming as her heart shattered. What have you become? You idiot, stop screaming. Go out there and stop doing nothing. Why are you pitying yourself? There's nothing to feel pity about. These things happen to everyone, you're not special, think of all the others who go through the same. You're not the only one. You're not special. She wanted something, someone to hold on to. She shook, as she brought her palms to bury her face in her hands. She was exhausted of doing this, of feeling pain, then happiness, only to have it all start all over again. And that's when she decided. Enough. She was done. Just done. They don't care either way. Who are you kidding? She gripped the razor blade on her bedside table, hands shivering as she sat down gingerly on the bed. Her head hurt, her whole body hurt, so it wouldn't really matter if she made some more cuts to add to everything that was already hurting, would it? At least she'd die a painful death, something she was sure everyone she knew wished upon her. At least when her last breath left her body, she'd die along with the pain that had been with her throughout her whole life. At least that won't leave her. You're pathetic, self-pitying like this. She heard the doorbell ring and the distinct voice of her neighbor, a dodgy 30-year-old lady by the name of Mrs. Kawasaki, say, "Is everything okay, Mr. Machida?" "I heard some noises." Kuro's laugh was sickening as Rukia heard him say nonchalantly, "Everything's perfect." As if it was the most easiest lie to tell. Maybe it was. "No, everything's not perfect," Rukia wanted to scream. She brought the razor to her arm and slashed, tears streaming down her face as the skin ripped, causing blood to trickle down the length of her arm as she traced the sharp edge against her skin. "There. That's your punishment, that's for being the worst daughter anyone could ever have. Why didn't she think of this before? After all, no one's going to care if you die or not." It was true. What was the point? She slashed again, continuing to make perfect, long slashes across her pale skin, with an artist's precision, for each flaw she had. That's for not being good enough. Tears blurred her vision. For being ugly. She didn't want to feel anything. No pain, no hope, no disappointment, nothing. For being stupid. She hoped Mrs. Kawasaki wouldn't come inside to check, just in case. She could be a very irritating, suspicious old woman. Rukia didn't want to be saved. It was a good thing, now that she thought about it, that she'd locked her room door from inside. Who are you kidding? No one's going to save you. You can't even save yourself. Useless, useless, useless. Then why dash? Why did she feel like she wanted someone to come, someone to save her? For being useless. Why would they want to even remember you? You have no one to love, and those who were there, you pushed them away. You can't even apologize to Hisana. Why do you think anyone will ever apologize to you? Cuts after cuts that the marble floor, which had been painstakingly white before, was cold and stained with her blood now as she slowly buried herself into the ground, curling up in the corner of her bedroom. The words, "perfect," she'd so meticulously carved on her skin once upon a time were raw and fresh, beginning to bleed again. She felt woozy. Inside her head, she was still screaming, yet the only noise she could hear was Mrs. Kawasaki still talking with Kuro, insisting he let her in. For being so proud. No matter how much pain she inflicted upon herself, she couldn't stop. Why? Why? What had she done that had ousted her from her family? For not saying you're sorry. If they'd just tell her everything that was wrong with her, she'd change. She'd change in a heartbeat if it meant they would accept her. People talked about knight in shining armors, someone coming into the girl's life and saving her from drowning in her own depression, for loving her for who she was. Well, where was the person now that she needed him the most? Where was that love story everyone wrote about? The image of Ichigo's scowling face flashed through her mind as her vision began to blur, fading, and her heart panged as she realized she wouldn't get to say goodbye to him. She smiled a little. He was something else, that lucky bstrd. For a minute, when she'd looked at him, been with him, looked into his eyes, she'd felt like she actually meant something to someone. But then that feeling of safety of being in his arms had fallen the minute she'd seen her painting hanging on that wall. She felt her mind spin, and her mouth go dry. The razor fell from her hands and on the floor with a clang. I wonder what it would feel like to have someone to love, Ichigo. She knew she had only a few minutes left before the pain overcame her. But you made me happy anyway. She had accepted it, finally. She was going to die, and then everything would be quiet. Peaceful, at last. No one to call her names, no one she could annoy, no one to hate her. Everything would disappear and she'll have what she'd wanted, at last. End. I'm sorry for being such a horrible daughter, Mom, and for being so horrible to you, Hisana. I don't know what I did, but I wish I knew how to be better. I would be if I knew. I'm so sorry. She let out a small sigh. Just then someone banged on her bedroom door and she heard Mrs. Kawasaki calling. Trying to unlock the door as she shook. Rukia, are you in there? Mrs. Kawasaki called, but to Rukia, her voice sounded like it was coming from the far end of a long corridor. Rukia, answer me. This wasn't how Rukia wanted to die. She'd wanted to die in the arms of a loved one. Despite everything, she'd always thought she'd find someone to love in the end. But now, for one last time, she knew she wouldn't. Rukia. Rukia, open the door. But if she was going to die, then why not die with a smile on her face? Her phone lit up and began to ring. Out of the corner of her slowly fading vision, she saw Ichigo's caller ID flashing across her phone's screen. Maybe he'd sensed that something was wrong. Maybe this was the universe's way of telling her that she was getting the chance of dying in the presence of a loved one, because Ichigo was as close to a loved one she would ever get. She wished she could pick up his call and say goodbye for one last time, but as her vision began to black out, she knew it was too late. She smiled. Thank you. Her eyes rolled back. She swayed and fell, her head hitting the marble floor. Her arms stretched out, inches away from her still ringing phone. Ichigo. Lost and insecure, you found me, you found me. Lying on the floor, surrounded. Why'd you have to wait? Where were you? Where were you? Just a little late. You found me, you found me. Have a little faith. Ichigo couldn't shake that tugging in his chest that something was terribly wrong. He tapped his feet impatiently as he sat there on the park bench, his phone held to his ear as he waited for Rukia to pick up. Ever since she had departed from the bar without any explanation, Ichigo had been worried. He was about to rush out of the pub when the bartender had stopped him, demanding he pay for the drinks. By the time Ichigo had thrown a few bills at his face and ran out to follow Rukia, she'd disappeared. Ichigo hadn't gone home though. Oh no, he'd run up the street, hoping to catch sight of her somewhere. He had no idea where she lived, she'd never told him, and he cursed himself for not asking her. After another half an hour of running and futile searching, he had given up and huffed down to sit on a park bench, out of breath. He'd tried her phone earlier, but she hadn't picked up. And now here he was, panting, frustrated and fighting a desperate urge to punch something. DMN it. He cursed loudly as he disconnected the call yet again. Several passers-by stared at him as he clutched his phone tightly in his fist, shaking. He felt like throwing his phone against the gray sidewalk and watching as it shattered into pieces. That tugging in his chest wouldn't go away, and with each second, he seemed to grow even more agitated. He leaned forward onto the bench, elbows on his knees, running a palm over his face. Why isn't she picking up? He'd seen the look on her face when they danced. Despite that uneasy fluttering in his stomach, he'd remained there by her in his arms, reveling in the fact that he'd made her look comfortable, made her warm. For that moment, as they danced to the music in the background, Ichigo had looked down into Rukia's eyes and gotten lost. For the first time, he'd just given up. Given up on hiding, on trying to look badass and guarded, given up on everything. He'd felt nothing and yet, everything. And then, all of a sudden, she jumped out of his arms and escaped. What the hell happened to her so suddenly? He frowned. Where was he supposed to go now? Home. He racked his brains, trying to remember something that Rukia might have said about her house, a landmark, or directions, or any name, anything that might help him locate it. Nothing. He scowled. Just then his phone rang. His heart skipped a beat. He jumped, fumbling for it desperately, and looked down at the caller ID, wishing against his wildest dreams that it was Rukia calling him back. Home. DMN. Yeah, what? He said, disgruntled, picking up. Brother. Ichigo's eyes softened as he recognized the voice. It was Yuzu, one of his little twin sisters. Where are you? Out, just had some stuff to do. Why? Are you guys okay? Oh, yes, we're fine. It's just that. Well, Dad hasn't returned from the hospital yet, and he usually comes back by this time. Ichigo rolled his eyes. He'll be fine, Yuzu. No one's crazy enough to mug him or anything. Brother, don't say that. He chuckled drily, although he felt far from humorous at the moment. You know it's true. Oh, but seriously, what if he's lost? The loon's been living here before we were even born, Yuzu. He couldn't get lost if he wanted to. But he should have been home an hour ago. Ichigo raised a brow, frowning. An hour? Yes. Karen's saying maybe it's just another patient but still dash. Yeah, it can be. He shrugged. I mean, it's happened tons of times before. But brother. Listen, Yuzu dash. Ichigo's voice softened, the way it always did whenever he was talking to either of his sisters, especially Yuzu. She was so fragile and innocent, it almost made him want to hide her from the terrible world. He'll be fine. Trust me, nothing can harm that jackass. He'll be back any minute. But what if he isn't? Ichigo sighed. He will be. I'm worried. He let out another sigh. DMN Ishin. Ichigo was going to kill his father once he got his hands on him. The idiot was probably just wandering the streets scaring poor defenseless old ladies, for all he knew. As if Ichigo didn't have enough to worry about, what with Rukia's sudden departure, now Ishin was being added to that plate. Great, just fantastic. But then, maybe Ishin knew something about Rukia's house. Back at the train station after their fight, when Rukia and Ichigo had been talking, bickering, Ishin had been chatting with Kuro. Maybe Kuro had slipped in their address, or another contact number or something. Say what, Yuzu, I'll go drop by the hospital, Ichigo said into his phone. I'll see if Dad's there and tell him to give you a call, or I'll give you a call myself. Okay. There was a sniff from the other end. Okay. He smiled. Good. Now stop worrying and go watch T.V or something. Lock the door and you and Karen take care of yourself and dash. Don't allow any strangers inside, no matter what they say or who they are. Yuzu giggled as Ichigo grinned. Got it, brother. Thank you. Yeah. No problem. I'll see you later. Okay. Love you. He smiled. Love you too. Clicking his phone shut, Ichigo got up and stretched. It was completely dark, crickets chirping away in the night as the cool breeze blew through his hair. He looked up to see a full moon night, and for some strange reason, smiled at the night sky, before looking down, brain whirring. Although Ichigo wasn't very much worried about Ishin, the idiot could land a mean uppercut if messed with, he was genuinely getting a little anxious. Dad never came home late, and when he did, he made sure to call and let the children know so that they wouldn't be worried. What the hell is up with him now? That took longer than expected. Ishin said loudly, cracking his knuckles as he walked out of the operation room, his usually goofy grin placed on his face. He was followed by another surgeon, who looked highly irritated, and a trembling, mousy-faced intern. Didn't think the guy would bleed so seriously though. He wouldn't have dash, the other surgeon said menacingly as he glared at the nerdy intern, who shivered under his gaze, lifting a trembling hand to set his glasses straight. If it wasn't for the brilliant Michiro here. You were told to hold the clamp, you fool, not shake and potentially kill the patient. I'm sorry, sir. I dash. You're not going to see the inside of an or for a whole month, let me tell you that. I don't, I'm so dash. Ah, leave the poor chap alone, Ryota. Ishin clapped a hand on Michiro's back, whose whole body shook under the impact. His concentration was somewhere else, and who can blame him when there's a gorgeous nurse standing next to him in scrubs? He looked at the intern with a wise look on his face. You hit that, Michi. And I will help you hit that in 10 days, strictly following the 10 levels of Stuckton by Isshin Kurosaki, a step-by-step guide in how to score with a young woman in just 10 days. Ah, here we go. Ryota muttered, you're mental. I don't even know how you became a doctor, Isshin, but you desperately need a shrink. Isshin pouted, you're such a spoil sport. Ryota didn't say anything, but left them, muttering under his breath. Isshin watched him go, and then his grip on Michiro's shoulders tightened, making the intern yelp. Son, I was able to save that patient and your butt today. Ishin said quietly, his voice dead serious, but maybe next time I won't be able to, and I would lose my patient and you'd be on probation. So if you know what's good for you, don't do that mistake again. Michiro nodded, trembling, and Ishin's face brightened up once again. Now. Where were we? Levels of Stockton. I continue to try to tell my son, you see, but I've given up. It's obvious he has no interest in girls. I'm just waiting for him to come out of the closet. The girls one is obviously completely waste for him, and then I'll start working on a guide for him. Say what? I'll give you a ride home and we'll talk over it. Just let me call my children and tell them I'm not dead. Ishin winked, taking his phone out of his pocket and flipping it open. You have a total of 11 missed calls from home, carrot head. Ishin grinned, shaking his head. They all must have been really worried. Just as Ishin was about to hit the call button, the doors of the emergency ward burst open. Dr. Kurosaki. Ishin jumped and turned to see a very frightened-looking nurse running up to him. What? What's the matter? We need a doctor ASAP. There's a girl, she's not breathing. Oh God, there's so much blood, she attempted suicide and her family's here and we can't find a pulse. She doesn't, we don't know, and no one's on duty in trauma and you were the first doctor I could, the nurses dash. Ishin pushed the rambling nurse out of the way as gently as possible, clearly she was new if this was how she was handling things, and made his way to the trauma room, shoving his phone into his coat pocket. His heart beat frantically. There is a suicide patient in the hospital. Should I call psych? The nurse asked. No. Not now. He ordered, his voice loud and commanding. It would only make the patient panic even more. He burst through the door to see a loudly sobbing woman, a pale-looking man, and there, amidst a heap of frantic nurses lay a petite, raven-haired girl on the bed, the white sheet stained in her blood, her lips cracked, her eyes closed. Ishin's eyes widened as he immediately recognized her, and then the pale man he had talked to at the station, Rukia Kuchiki and Kuro Machida. What the? His eyes fell on Rukia's arm, which was so raw and scarred from cuts and wounds that it could barely be called an arm, rather a bloodied, intangible mass of flesh. She must have hit an artery, or a couple of them, we can't seem to see where, and the lady is in hysterics, and she's had a heavy concussion, her pupils dash. For starters, calm down. Ishin snapped, rushing forward to check Rukia himself, making quick work as the nurses around him quickly hurried out of his way. He gave prompt instructions to them, in a no-nonsense voice, and his eyes narrowed at Kuro, who was watching from the sidelines, looking deathly pale, as if he'd just seen a ghost. He was watching the whole scene unfold in front of him as if he'd temporarily gone autistic. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was fear of being caught. Ishin had been suspicious of Kuro the minute he'd talked to him at the station, the minute he'd realized that he and Rukia didn't share the same surname. It was obvious that there was some sort of history between them. Hand me the paddles. He called out sharply when no amount of CPR seemed to be working on her. Oh my God. The woman choked, bursting in sobs. She must be Rukia's mother, Ishin surmised. Kuro, ma'am, we need you to get out of here dash. Kuro's eyes snapped up. His eyes flooded with recognition. Kurosaki. Ishin Kurosaki. Ishin gritted his teeth, feeling sick. I said, you and your wife need to get out of here, Kuro. Charge to 100. He instructed the nurse. What dash? I said get out. Ishin said angrily. Kuro was sick. What had he done to Rukia? Ishin knew enough from Ichigo to know that Rukia was a quiet girl who was secretive, admittedly very friendly, and loved to paint, and that she loved Kuro unconditionally. He'd seen her on arriving back from university on the train station. She had been an excited mess when she'd run into Kuro's arms. Then what had made her do this? Kuro gripped the woman's arm and the nurse shushed them out as Ishin ordered, clear. He pressed the paddles to Rukia's chest, the electric shock jolting through her limp body. She jerked up, and then fell back against the pillows. Ishin glimpsed at the heart monitor, not realizing that his hands were smeared in Rukia's blood. Nothing, the monitor showed a straight line. Sheet. Yeah, I was looking for him. The receptionist smiled at Ichigo, having known him from when he had been a little kid. Ichigo looked around, it had been a while since he'd last visited the hospital. Years, in fact. Before, he'd used to visit the hospital to amuse himself, it used to be his playground. It was practically like a second home, and he used to visit all the time with his mother, going on rounds, doing mock surgeries, laughing and holding the tray for the doctors when they did stitches, getting a lollipop as his reward. The nurse's voice jerked Ichigo out of his thoughts. He's in trauma, a case came in at the last minute. You can wait outside. Right. That tugging feeling was still there in his heart as he began to walk towards Trauma 1. He felt queasy, he couldn't sit, he just had to do something, it, walk, pace, kick, punch. What had happened to Rukia? He bowed his head down thoughtfully, maybe Ishin would help. He had to. That fool has to come to some good use. Ichigo grimaced, looking at his phone for the millionth time. Nothing, no message or missed call, although there was no chance for Rukia to call and for him to miss it, considering he had been checking his phone every other minute. He took a left, knowing his way to the trauma room easily. From a distance, he could hear audible sobbing coming towards him. He sighed, he was used to the grief and depressed atmosphere of a hospital by now. He flipped his phone open. Might as well call Yuzu. Dialing the number, he raised it to his ear as he took another left. Yuzu answered on the third ring. Hello, Kurosaki residence. Hey Yuzu, it's me. Dad's fine, there was some complications in a surgery and a last-minute trauma that got him late, from what the nurse told me. Oh thank God. I was so worried. Don't. I'll tell him and he'll be here in another half an hour. I've just got a couple of stuff to do later but it won't be too. Ichigo's voice trailed away as he reached the trauma room, and stared at the sight that met his eyes. Kuro and some other lady were standing outside the same room. The woman was crying her eyes out, as Kuro held her, looking blank. Ichigo scowled, eyes narrowing. What the hell is Rukia's dad doing in here? Wait, Ichigo froze, his blood running cold. Where's Rukia? Yuzu's voice echoed through the phone, but Ichigo barely heard. Brother. Brother, are you there? Yeah, I'm. Where the F is Rukia? Why isn't she with them? Why are they crying? What is dash? The window of the trauma room was open, someone seemed to have forgotten to pull the curtains down, so everything happening inside the room was visible from Ichigo's angle. Brother, are you okay? And that's when the phone fell from his hands. Ichigo stared through the window, heart thudding, at the lifeless body of Rukia Kuchiki there, as Ishin madly attempted to bring her back to life. Another doctor seemed to have joined him and they were arguing, the other doctor trying to force the paddles out of Ishin's grip. The steady line of Rukia's heart monitor could be seen from a mile away, in Ichigo's opinion. He couldn't breathe, he felt his chest constrict as he stared, frozen. No. He watched, and felt a familiar pang of pain flood through him. She looked so small. And her arms, all that blood. He knew it. He'd caught a glimpse of the scars on her arm when he'd first met her at the campus. He felt sick, looking at all that mess and blood. Why would she do that to herself? He watched as Ishin lifted the paddles and yelled an order, pressing it to her chest. Live, Rukia. He watched as her limp body jolted forward and then she fell back, her hair brushed back, eyes closed. He wondered how cold her hands would be if he touched them right now. Live, it. He watched as Ishin slumped back, wiping his brow. The other doctor came and gently took the paddles from his hands, and this time Ishin didn't protest. He looked like he'd given up, and that's when Ichigo felt rage explode inside him. That bloody midget, who the heck does she think she is to die like this? No. He yelled, startling the other visitors. Kuro and the woman jumped. Ishin and the other doctor turned to look at him through the window as Ichigo began to storm forward. No, she does not get to die. Ishin looked shocked as Ichigo burst inside. Ichigo, don't dash. She is not dying and you are not giving up on her. I know you aren't. I know, but you're not supposed to be in dash. You swore. You swore after MOM that you wouldn't. Ichigo felt a horrible stinging in the corner of his eyes as he shouted derisively. He was so mad right now. So mad at her. Yes, I know I did, booty dash. No make. Her. Live. Ichigo dash. No. Just no, Dad. No. I don't dash. And then a small beep made both of them freeze. Ichigo, stunned, turned around to see a spike go up on Rukia's heart monitor. And then another. Then another. Triple X. Kuro Machida was standing in the hallway, frozen. Rukia had just tried to kill herself. He looked down to see that his hands were trembling. Christ, what the hell had he done that had made her lash out so badly? Why did she have to make such a big deal about everything? He could go to jail if she opened her mouth and told anyone what he had done under the influence of alcohol, admittedly a very slight amount. He just had around 2 glasses. He could be arrested for treating her like that. He'd come close to hitting her. The only thing that seemed to calm him down a bit was the fact that Ami had treated Rukia the same way, and the girl had kept her mouth shut. So Rukia would keep quiet this time around too. Right? Kuro gritted his teeth, running a hand through his hair. Why had Mrs. Kawasaki come? She'd interrupted everything. Why had Rukia lived in all this mess? She shouldn't have survived, in it. She should have been just left like that and everything would be fine. But now, there would be questions raised. There would be people asking Rukia all sorts of things, there would be social services involved. Kuro would be asked hundreds of questions about Rukia's mental health, and all along, he'd be a suspect too, and his past history didn't help. He leaned against the doorway, breathing heavily as he heard the commotion inside. Mrs. Kawasaki had shakily left the hospital to go get some of Rukia's spare clothes the minute they both had seen the heart monitor bleep into life through the window. Kuro, however, couldn't stand to enter that place anymore. It made him puke, the pool of blood staining the white marble, the paintings in her room that hung eerily, haunting him with their stares, as if accusing him. Run. He held his head, going mad. He had a splitting headache, he could feel himself losing control. He wanted to smash his fist into the glass window of that room and yell at Rukia. Just for 1 or 2 heavenly minutes, let out all the frustration and the tension and yell at her. How had things gone so wrong? Why couldn't she leave him the hell alone? None of them had wanted to meet him all those years ago when he'd been declared a drunkard and diagnosed to be mental, then why now? Did Rukia know that? He wondered. Did she know the true reason why he'd been deemed unfit to be a parent to either of his children when he'd fought for custody? That he'd been a pathetic drunk, who slowly gave way to depression, whiling away office hours as he sunk into pleasure and sought any way to distract himself? That he was bordering on psychopathic tendencies? That he'd stopped taking his medication at the start of this year? That's right, he thought bitterly, you're not the only one who's effed up, Rukia. I am too, but you don't see me slashing my wrists. He looked into the window and saw Ichigo, who was now on his knees, clutching his head as he breathed deeply, trying to calm himself down. Ishin was checking Rukia, frowning thoughtfully. And then slowly, as if on slow motion, he moved to stare sideways and his eyes locked with Kuro's. They say that you can always tell the guilty one by the way he looks into your eyes, and at that moment, Kuro felt his heart race. He just knew, that Ishin was going to do everything he could to bring him down. Ishin knew, Kuro didn't know how, but Ishin knew that Kuro had done something. Run. He didn't really have any other option, did he? And so, stumbling backwards, Kuro spun around and began to walk away, as fast as possible. He heard exclamations, nurses asking him to sign this or that, but he shoved them away as he jogged. He was getting the F out of there, as soon as possible, and he was not going to look back. He was collecting his stuff and never coming back. He felt anger boil through him, all this because of Rukia. Why couldn't she have just died and be done with it? From behind him, Isshin's eyes followed him, and he contemplated whether or not he should Ichigo anything. He decided against it, it really was none of his business. And so, Isshin watched Kuro go, feeling disgusted with the man who was running away from his own daughter.